Hello there, lovely. Good afternoon, and welcome to Lunchtime Cafe right here on Camnet TV. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Joe Smarter to be with you for the next 1 hour. And of course, on Friday, Republican President Hakainde Hichilema was addressing Parliament and the nation regarding the progress that has been made in the application of the values and principles that the nation has, and he was making that address, and he continues to make that address to Parliament as per custom each and every year. Now, there have been some expectations from civil society organizations, the church, and other stakeholders, and hence today we host Mr. Gideon Musonda. He is the executive director for Advocates for Democratic Governance Foundation. He joins us via phone. Mr. Musonda, good to have you here, and good afternoon.
Thank you very much. I'm very much humbled to be featured on your program, and good afternoon to the viewers out there.
Okay, good to have you here, Mr. Musonda. First things first, as an organization, I'm sure you had high expectations, or you had expectations altogether regarding the presidential address, or the SONA as it is fondly called, by the president to Parliament and the general public. Let's begin with some of your expectations before we dive into the nitty-gritties of the speech.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, we keenly followed the president's presentation, to Parliament, and through Parliament to all of us as citizens. And before that, we had expectations, especially that relates to our areas of operations. And that is to do with democracy and constitutionalism, something to do with good governance and integrity. But we also expected that the president would also dwell much on, issues of patriotism and national unity. So specifically, our expectations around democracy and constitutionalism was, for the president to extensively discuss issues of electoral violence and vote buying that has been, characterizing the by-election recently that we've been having. And as you may be aware, these acts erodes the integrity of the electoral process and threaten Zambia's democratic principles. So our expectation in this regard was for the president to make clear, pronouncements on the government's practical actions for purposes of curbing electoral violence and ensure the elections remain free and fair. Then on the part of governance, we also had expectations. Of course, that corruption has been, a thorn, in our, governance structure. It has been a very big challenge that we all need to fight. So we expected that corruption issues would be extensively discussed by the president. And our major, expectation in this regard was that the president would outline tangible steps to combat corruption that strengthen, the institutional independence, but also, our rating in terms of good governance. So we expected that the president would also, point out, to issues to do with law reform that will, help in curbing this vice. Then the other expectation that we had was relating to law reforms that promote democracy and good governance. George, and the viewers out there, you are aware, that the freedoms of citizens are extremely fundamental in ensuring that there is democracy and good governance. Freedoms such as freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of association are key. And expected that having discussed those, the president would also make reference to the importance of ensuring that there is no reform that would promote, such freedoms. Unfortunately, we didn't hear the president, speaking to the issue that has been pending, such as the reform of the Archaic Public Order Act. That takes away, these freedoms. So we expected that the president, in addition to his pronouncements as commitments, by the government, towards enhancing these rights, we expected that more reform would be, key in that regard. Unfortunately, that was not done. But we also expected that the president would touch on issues of cyber regulations. We are aware that the president has been consistent in condemning, the abuse of social media, the cyber crime that is happening, but also the issues of, cyber bullying. Yeah. So we expected that the president would speak to those, issues. However, our major expectation in this regard was that the president, while presenting that report, would demonstrate how such regulations, if put in place, would be implemented in a manner that upholds the fundamental rights such as the freedom of expression, assembly, and association. Against, it's an issue of how regulations can be put in place while we respect these fundamental rights, rather than restricting the space. Yeah, we feel that the president went further, to outline, the evil that is happening, online, but did not do much, on how these freedoms, would continue to be exercised. Yeah. So our fear is that in trying to regulate, and if you've been following pronouncements from government officials, senior government officials, they are more linked on issues of condemning, the happening online, issues of trying to come up with laws that will, over-regulate, if you like. Yeah. So we don't see the balancing up, with the issues of promoting these rights. For us, this is key, because such regulation sometimes takes away from what the Constitution provides for in terms of promoting these human rights, like it has been outlined in Article 20 and 21 of our Constitution. So we had these expectations, but we also have mixed feelings on major pronouncements that came out from, the presentation of the president in that regard. Constitutionalism, yes, it was one of the expectations, but the manner the president is calling and the timing, the president is calling, for CSOs and other partners to support these amendments. For us, we have mixed feelings, and Joe, probably we will discuss more as the conversation unfolds on this program.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Mr. Msonda, my next question to you is that yes or no, were your expectations met during the presidential address? Yes or no?
It's both. Unfortunately, it's both.
Okay.
And let me demonstrate this. Let me demonstrate this. You are aware how extensive, if you follow, the president extensively discussed issues patriotic, and ensure that they promote national unity, for this country. For us, how that was delivered was extremely important, and we totally agree with the president, and we need to support, him, on that flank. The president mentioned issues of being patriotic, loving our country, being loyal to our country. I think that is extremely, key. Other than that, then will be taking away, issues of, the dignity, the issues of, us being proud of, our own country. Where there is no unity, all these issues that I've demonstrated here or I've discussed in terms of democracy, constitutionalism, human dignity, and these other values, it cannot happen. So we feel that the national unit, patriotism and national unit, it's key because it provides that bedrock for, any development to occur. It's a foundation on which all these issues and other rights, can be, enjoyed. Yeah. So we feel that the president extensively discussed that, and as citizens, we need to support him. We have got no option on that. Yeah. National unity is very key. So on that one, we agree, and we expected that the president would pronounce himself, very strongly on those. Yeah. However, like I have discussed, when the president mentioned, for example, that the citizens out there, human rights advocates, political parties, activists, and various categories that the president mentioned that they have continued to enjoy and feared freedoms relating to association, expression, media, and all those that were outlined. That it's happening. It's unfettered. In other words, it's unrestricted. I think we have a divergent view on that one.
Okay.
We feel that these freedoms, they are not, we are facing some restrictions, if you like, where citizens sometimes have, difficulties in exercising these freedoms. Now, let me give an example of the recent preliminary report that was, shared, by the UN rapporteur who visited and independently conducted her exercise. What was the preliminary outcome? That these freedoms were facing some restrictions here and there. We are not saying these are not being enjoyed. Now, the way that was received by the president, if you go to the state job and the viewers, is that we are enjoying and see that freedoms, these rights to freedoms. Yeah. So we are saying there are things that are in place that are even taken away from citizens fully enjoying these rights. For example, I made reference to the CAAC law, Public Order Act. Public Order Act has continued to be abused to shrink the civic and political space.
Okay.
To shrink or take away these rights we are talking about. And one of the recommendations in that UN rapporteur, she recommended that we needed to change the laws that takes away these freedoms. And Public Order Act was one of them. Penal Code needed revision. We are aware of, Camnet. We are aware of, political party actors, who are, and some of them, facing these cases, you know, in the courts of law. Yeah. So for us, we welcome that report from UN Rapporteur. But before the UN Rapporteur, you are aware that as CSOs jointly and ADIC, you know, has been part of that, that we have pronounced ourselves in terms of how citizens are enjoying, you know, these rights and the challenges we are having in terms of, you know, enjoyment of these rights. Yeah, and we've called out, you know, on issues first to deal with the laws and ensuring that those who implement the laws, such as the police, you know, and other institutions, implementing institutions or law enforcement institutions, should ensure that they uphold these freedoms because they are fundamental in the promotion of democracy and good governance. So, to that extent, that's why I'm saying yes and no. Yeah, yeah. So it's not like there is that enjoyment of unfettered, you know, enjoyment of those rights. Yeah. So in some ways, yeah, we are seeing these restrictions.
Okay.
The other thing that we've been, you know, pushing against is the issue of cyber laws. The current law that we have, cyber security and cyber crime act, it's bad. We condemned it in 2021. 2020, 2021, when it was enacted, and it has continued to be used. Now, there was propositions from the government part in terms of revealing, by repealing this and repressing the current law, repealing the current law and repressing with the two bills to be enacted into acts of law. You are aware that they've separated, the government intention is to separate the cyber crime and cyber security bill. Now, the manner in which those laws were initially formulated, should I say bills? Initially, the manner in which those bills were, you know, formulated and presented to Parliament, it raised concern. And we pushed back as CSOs, as a consortium, and our view has been that, yes, we are not against regulating the cyberspace. We are not saying in the cyberspace everything is all good. There is cybercrime, we are aware. There is social media abuse, we are aware, and we agree, you know, with the president that yes, there is need to sanitize the cyberspace or the digital space. However, in doing so, our expectation is that there will, you know, it will not be at the expense of taking away these rights where the citizens have. Yeah. So there is need to balance up, you know, regulation, but also promotion of these human rights. Yeah. So the other issues, Joe, was relating to President Cole, you know, for support, you know, that we support the issue of constitutional reforms.
Okay. So, Mr. Msonda, before we come to constitutional reforms, I just wanted to find out, you mentioned the aspect of democracy. Now, there has been concerns from political parties, opposition political parties, some governance stakeholders, the CSOs, that there is shrinking democratic space in Zambia. Did the president address that to the latter, or let me get your views regarding the purported shrinking democratic space in Zambia?
Yeah, so the president presented the picture that all is well.
Okay.
Yeah. And he made reference to elections, yeah, that have been happening and that have been generally, peaceful. And yes, he spoke positively on the need to have, positive politics that should unite us rather than dividing us.
Okay.
Now, when you consider, and I like no argument on the aspect of generally peaceful, because generally obviously it's with exceptions. Yeah. So the level at which the elections have been generally peaceful is when you consider elections that happens at local government level. Generally, those have been peaceful, and our own analysis is because they have been less competitive. They have been less competitive compared to the parliamentary by-elections. You saw the violence that happened, in Kawambwa. You saw the violence that happened in Petauke. And our expectation was that the president would not just take that issue that generally, yes, because local government and maybe one parliamentary, constituency, election, went without much of, conflicts or violence. We expected the president to pronounce more on this, violent act that happened in Kawambwa and Petauke. Because we know that the upcoming 2026 election will even be more competitive.
Okay.
Now, if Kawambwa, where there was high contestation, if Petauke, where there was high competition, was to be taken as an example of what is likely to happen, during, 2021 election, then we are backtracking, we are sliding back on democracy. So for us, we expected that, yes, there is good, things that are happening, are generally highlighted, but we expected the president to condemn violence in the strongest term. For us, yes, even if he touched on that, but we expected that the president would point out the violence in Kawambwa and the violence in Petauke, because it takes away that. And usually, the happenings in the by-elections, somehow it gives a pointer, to what is likely to happen, to general election. So if we don't keep this at this level, the violence at this level, it may escalate as we go to 2021. And we saw this trend in 2020, 2021, if you remember.
Okay.
The elections that were held prior to 2021, we are marred with violence. So it's extremely important that we point out those critical issues and condemn in the strongest terms. You highlight them because they may be hidden, in that generality, of the mentioning of the president. Yeah, if it's taken like that. So for us, such things takes away from the democracy. And then when you see situations where people who are trying to exercise their freedoms in terms of expressing, themselves, in terms of, for example, demonstration, in terms of freedom of speech, and you see a clear clause being applied on them, for us, those are indications for a dwindling democracy and not the democracy that is growing.
Now, Mr. Msonda.
When we say there has been this shrinking civic space. We measure that against the benchmarks of good practice, good standard, because we expect that there has to be rules that promote democracy, not the current Public Order Act we are having now, not the current Cyber Security and Cybercrime Act we are having now, because these have got provision that takes away, from our democracy. Yeah. So on that basis, we have a different view. Yeah? Yes, the will should be there to demonstrate that it's extremely important that we promote our democracy, but we should also know things that are taken away from, our democracy, such as these bad ways.
Okay. Now, let's come to constitutionalism, Mr. Msondai. Obviously, you have told us what your expectations are. What needs to be done if your expectations were not met regarding constitutionalism in Zambia, Mr. Msondai, coming from your organization?
Thank you very much. You are aware that as CSOs and as ADEC, but in collaboration with other CSOs, we have been calling, for constitutional reforms since the president took and his government took office. And we even want that fast forwarding or fast tracking these reforms in an election year or a year preceding the election is extremely dangerous.
Okay.
And it's like setting up for a failure of a noble process. We wonder that, and to a larger extent, we don't want to backslide. Like as I'm speaking on behalf of the organization, we don't want to backslide on the principle that we have been so clear on. We want that when the political temperature is high, in the year 2025 and 2026, even a longer process, we are not saying the limitation. For example, the president called to support for the limitation so that, there could be, some subdivision of larger constituencies for purposes of ensuring that there is equity in the distribution of resources. We are not against the principle behind the president's idea.
Okay.
Now, the unfortunate part is that the call now is being made at the wrong time. The president has, in his addresses and pronouncements on various platforms since he took office, he has been talking about the need to change constitution.
Okay.
The need to change constitution. But there has never been practical steps to implement the pronouncement. Remember that we called for a clear roadmap, and that clear roadmap should have various stakeholders' input, should be an agreed upon roadmap.
Okay.
We are against the piecemeal amendments of the Constitution. Why? Because of the politicization of the process, especially when it's done in a year preceding or in an election year. So, on that basis for us, the rationale may be good, but unfortunately it's a wrong timing. You have seen, obviously you've read or you watched, some commentaries from political actors, obviously even non-state actors, especially politicians, who are afraid that, everything that can be brought to this can be mixed with bad provisions and the like. They don't trust that, this noble exercise can go well. So that's a politicization we are talking about. If the bill proceeds in Parliament, it will be shot down on account by the opposition, of course, in terms of the numbers. Obviously, the ruling party will need the opposition, numbers in order to make, that two-thirds amendment required for them to change the constitution. Yeah. So it's this politicization, fears, mistrust against our electoral process, especially when we are close to the election. Yeah. So on that principle, we are against the rationale of subdividing. It's something that we even pushed ourselves. But this was supposed to, in fact, even propose that this constitutional amendment, the right time to do it was either 2022, 2023, 2022, or let me just say between 2022 and 2024. That would have been much better, rather than this time. Because everything is just politics. Now, the president has said, yes, this constitution. And if you follow his speeches that he has been making, and it's not only on values and principles, but also other addresses that the president has made. Has made difference to the constitutional amendment. One of them, like last year, was on the issue of increasing the numbers of women in politics. And we needed to change this. What has happened is 1 year now. And in fact, if you recall precisely the time that he called for the constitutional amendment, it's when he addressed the women day celebration. And that was not the first time, even years before that. Now, what has happened? There hasn't been any roadmap. Because we need to see the roadmap. We need to see how it will happen. Unfortunately, this has just ended up in pronouncements without practical steps to address those. So for us, two issues. These misconceptions, because the roadmap hasn't been agreed upon, hasn't been discussed, and then it's a wrong timing. The way the normal process happened, you remember the referendum.
Okay.
To a large extent, the failure of that referendum, which, if you consider going through the content on how the Bill of Rights was supposed to be expanded, everything was okay. To the larger extent, everything was okay. The content, people were, happy with the content, but you saw the politicization around that noble process. It failed. So we don't want to waste time on something that is likely to fail. And when you are in an election year, and the fears of the politicians, you may not even argue with them or condemn them. You know how the them was brought up. Firstly, there was those pointing out of those positive provisions here and there and there and there. But unfortunately, we saw that the bill that was presented, in our view, it was toxic. It was mixed with good provisions and bad provisions. So that's a fear that even these politicians, other political actors are having. Because the politicization of the processes, considering our background, of these constitutional amendments, partial constitutional amendments, I think that they haven't gone well. They haven't done us a good service, and so we have a different view on that one.
Okay. Now, Mr. Musonda, let's come to good governance and integrity. How can Zambia as a country uphold the tenets of good governance and integrity?
Well, it's extremely important it's extremely important.
Okay.
You are aware that one of the fundamental things that are required for us to have good governance is that, one, we need to avoid corruption.
Okay.
Corruption is synonymous to bad governance. Unfortunately, we see, and we cannot argue, that year in, year out, despite condemnation of corruption, corruption seems not to be going away.
Okay.
We are still struggling with the fight against corruption. It's like people are finding value. Yeah? Corrupt people are finding benefit to continue doing that. So could it be because we don't have systems that can help eradicate corruption, or what? That's why the presentation of the president on Friday was key. Because being good citizens, being patriotic to your nation, you wouldn't want to do something that negates development. It's extremely important that you should not just be watched by the law for you to do the right thing. I think the president also made difference to that. And we agree with the president that we should not only do the right thing because the law says don't do this, or you should do this. Yeah. It's a moral issue to do. It should be the moral issue for you to do the right thing. So corruption, and I'm picking this issue because for me it's paramount as an advocate, for good governance, and it's something that really it makes me feel bad, because the figure that the president came with, and of course his government, in terms of one, condemning corruption. But we have seen this now continuing, and this is the 4th year we haven't done much. And we're still finding ways in which we can drastically reduce this act. It's taken away from the resources that are supposed to be distributed for purposes of helping all citizens in this country. So, for us, we have seen some loopholes. The loopholes sometimes lies in the law.
Okay.
You are aware that there were some stakeholders thinking against responding to the calls by various stakeholders that yes, in corruption we need to stiffen the law. Maybe the law is not good enough.
But Mr. Msonda, just on that one, we have seen successful governments coming and talking about corruption and stiffening laws on corruption, and yet nothing much has been done. We have seen other countries that have stiffened laws on corruption, and corruption has ceased to exist in their countries, or at least it has reduced to manageable numbers. But here in Zambia, we keep on getting pronouncement, government in, government out, and corruption keeps on increasing. The numbers of corruption keeps on increasing. Mr. Msonda, what is the solution to fighting corruption? What measures should be put in place?
I think from the leadership part, it's the real political will. I think we need that political will. We need, like the president mentioned, that we need to fight corruption of the past, of the present, and corruption to come in future. Unfortunately, our own observation is that the fight is more to do with the past than the present.
Okay.
And we have been consistent in calling upon the president and the government that the same vigor that we are seeing in fighting corruption of the past should be exerted, should be demonstrated, even in corruption that is happening currently. And of course, the corruption to be committed in the future. That way, we are likely to see the drastic drop of people involving themselves in corruption. As things stand, we can bet we will see more people to be corrupt after to be fought or to be taken to court after maybe the government after this regime is gone, because we are not seeing the same vigor that is being applied on the past. With the current happening. You are aware that there has been mention of some of the ministers involved, in corrupt, acts, and citizens, have called for those, ministers to be excused, and nothing has happened. Citizens are still waiting, and when citizens keep quiet.
Are you then suggesting, Mr. Msonda?
Current status, yes.
Mr. Msonda, are you then suggesting that they are sacred cows in the fight against corruption?
They are. That's a fact. Yes, if you ask the president and other government officials, they will say not sacred cow, because everybody, the president has come out, like that. But the action does not speak to that. So, for us, corruption need to be fought wholesomely. And that's why, as CSOs, we have called for law reform. For example, in the way the structure of the institution that is vested with the authority to fight or speak against the fight against corruption. We've said these offices, for example, the Director General, the board of SEC, are not supposed to be appointed by the president. Let the independent system or organ appoint these, because it becomes very difficult for them to, to be without bias in terms of fighting, or approaching, those who may be in high-ranking, positions in government, including the minister. We've seen in the past, that it was very difficult to deal with the minister than dealing with an officer, maybe some mayor or some council official or some, official elsewhere. We see that they move very fast in those instances than, in these high-ranking government officials. So for us, we feel that the law needs to be dealt with, but there has to be that serious commitment, that political will, to ensure that corruption is fought unbiased.
Okay.
Corruption is fought, without sparing anyone.
Okay.
So in this case, I think we need to have a serious conversation, and we need to see serious commitment in terms of what are the people expecting? If the people call out, this minister has been mentioned in corruption, and then this government official, here at Ministry of Finance, these officials have been mentioned and whatever.
Okay. So, Mr. Msonda,
the act when dealing with these, for example, those in the opposition and the like, we need to see the same happening in the current status.
Okay. So, Mr. Msonda, as we prepare to go, let me find out from you, what should be done to effectively address concerns of democracy, concerns of good governance, concerns of patriotism, concerns of effectively and efficiently fighting corruption, coming from a background of a CSO? What could you suggest to the powers that be moving forward as we wind up, Mr. Msonda?
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Let me start with issues to deal with patriotism and national unity. So for me, this is key. For me, this is key. For any development to happen, there has to be peace. For any development or democracy to be enjoyed, there has to be peace. Because we cannot talk about free and fair elections in an environment where there is no peace, where there is violence and the like. That is key, Joe. It's key for all of us to be patriotic and then ensure that there is national unity. In terms of democracy and constitutionalism, Joe and the viewers up there, this is very key. We must not only pronounce, but we must seem to be doing what we pronounce. Constitutionalism is about following the law. It's about adherence to what is set out. For example, if there is limitation, we know that the Constitution provides for limitations on the exercise of powers of those in the executive against those, in other organs of government. Are we seeing what's happening?
Okay.
Are we seeing, interference, for example, of the executive into judiciary? If that is happening, then we are getting, the principles and the values that we have in terms of observing democracy and constitutionalism. So for us, it's extremely important that we adhere to that. We need to deal with law reform. Unfortunately, this time around, it's becoming very difficult.
Okay.
It's becoming very difficult because of the politicization that I was talking about. Yeah. But if there can be a way in which to make, some reforms that can promote democracy, reforms that can promote good governance, for me that is key. That is key. Yeah. So I'm very worried because some of the recommendations that I make in terms of law reform, they are coming now at the wrong time, especially those to do with the Constitution. Are we seeing a united parliament where they can say, okay, we stick to this 1, 2, 3, 4 and done in good faith? Unfortunately, I cannot bet that is a united parliament that can say, okay, no, it's just on this principle and will not argue and then pass. But if there is a way of doing that, because we are critical in order to ensure that the upcoming elections are free and fair, then well and good. But we have to see a process. Where is the roadmap? Where is the consensus building that we've been talking about? So that we see these reforms that can be supported by non-state actors, but also state actors. Yeah, so I think that is very key.
Okay.
Yeah. And then The other part you talked about is what?
Okay, good governance.
Oh yeah, good governance. Yes, generally, yeah, like I spoke about, it's extremely important that we promote, good governance. It's extremely important. There's no nation that can develop without, good governance. Yeah, issues of corruption, issues of integrity. I think it's extremely important that citizens uphold such values and principles. Yeah, because they are key for any national development.
Okay. Mr. Msonda, let me thank you most sincerely for coming through, obviously joining us on this program via phone. Thank you so much for your input and obviously for your organization allowing you to make an appearance on this particular program via phone. Thank you so much, Mr. Msonda.
Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you very much to the viewers that have followed the program. We look forward to the implementation of the pronouncements that government has given. Those under him, we see that they will commit to these values and principles and ensure that there is serious implementation and it will not just end up at pronouncements. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Msonda, and you're extremely welcome. So that was Mr. Gideon Msonda. He is the Executive Director for Advocates for Democratic Governance Foundation, ADEG, making his appearance here on Camnet TV's Lunchtime Cafe via phone, of course. I have been your host, Joe. Smarter is my name. Thank you so much to everyone that spared their time to join us on this particular program. To my director upstairs, thank you so much. We'll see you when you see us. Good afternoon and God bless.